Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one.
There existed a place in occupied China where Japanese doctors cut people open alive to study the plague, froze human bodies in winter until the limbs turned to pure wood, and manufactured biological weapons on an industrial scale. The official name was the Water Purification Department. The real name was Unit 731. 12 facts about the operation that killed hundreds of thousands of people, planned to bomb San Diego with fleas, and never went to trial. Fact number 1. The doctors cut people while they were still alive. Inside the Pingfang complex in Harbin, in occupied Manchuria, prisoners were tied to surgical tables and opened from chest to stomach while they were still conscious. The doctors of Unit 731 did not use anesthesia. It was not forgetfulness, it was not a lack of supplies, it was a technical choice, defended in writing and applied as standard protocol throughout the entire existence of the unit. The justification presented by the researchers was that anesthesia distorted the data. A sedated body, according to them, altered the chemistry of the blood, changed the temperature of the organs, and masked the true progression of the disease. To generate records considered pure, the subject had to be awake. The majority of prisoners who passed through the dissection table had been purposely infected days before. Cholera, bubonic plague, anthrax, typhus. The doctors waited for the first symptoms to appear and took the subject straight to the room. The idea was to observe the damage of the disease in organs that were still functioning before death initiated decomposition. For the researchers, it was the only way to see what was really happening inside a sick body. A medical assistant from the unit described his first dissection in an interview with the New York Times in 1995. The prisoner knew what was going to happen and did not try to resist when he was taken to the room. He let himself be tied down in silence. The instant the doctor touched the scalpel to the skin, he realized there would be no sedation. The assistant said that moment was what marked him the most in the entire war, and that the memory never left him over the following decades. The procedures did not end there. Stomachs were surgically removed and the esophagus was sewn directly to the intestine to see if the victim continued digesting food. Brain, lung, and liver were removed in sequence, with the heart still beating. Each organ received a separate clinical file. The pages were archived, the bodies cremated in the unit's own furnaces, and the room was prepared for the next prisoner of the day. Alongside the dissections linked to disease study, there were experiments that nobody in the unit could justify as medicine. Prisoners' arms were amputated and sewn back on the opposite side of the body. Legs were switched with arms. Right limbs became left limbs, still functioning for a few hours until circulation failed. There was no scientific question behind this. It was pure curiosity, exercised on human beings without the right to refuse. The surgeon Ken Yuasa, who served in the Imperial Japanese Army and participated in similar operations outside Unit 731, estimated in public testimony that at least 1,000 Japanese medical professionals participated in dissections of living people during the war. They were doctors trained at the best universities in Japan, educated in respected hospitals. They returned home after the war, opened clinics, and treated patients for the rest of their lives without anyone knowing. Fact number 2. The Japanese planned to attack the American West Coast with bubonic plague. The name of the operation was Cherry Blossoms at Night. The primary target was San Diego, California. The secondary targets were Los Angeles and San Francisco. The date set for the attack was September 22, 1945. The war had already ended. Japan had surrendered on August 15th, but Unit 731 had been working on the plan for months, and the operation was only canceled well afterward. The chosen vector was the I-400 class submarine, the largest submerged vessel built until then. Each unit was more than 400 feet long, displaced 6,670 tons, and fit 3 attack aircraft inside the hull. To accommodate these planes, Japan developed the Aichi M6A Seiren, a fighter with folding wings and removable floats. The planes emerged from the submarine, assembled their wings on the deck, and took off just a few hundred miles from the American coast. Each Seiren would carry ceramic bombs developed by Unit 731 to withstand the impact and release live fleas infected with bubonic plague over American neighborhoods. When the fleas fell, they would attack urban rats, and the rats would spread the plague through the city within days. The transmission model was the same one that devastated Europe in the 14th century. The difference is that this time, it would be designed in a laboratory and delivered by modern military aircraft. The plan did not depend solely on the aircraft. Commando teams, trained by Unit 731, would disembark from the submarines at isolated points along the coast, with flasks of plague and cholera to contaminate water reservoirs, food markets, and public transportation stations. The combination of the 2 attacks, aerial and ground, was calculated by the researchers to produce an epidemic capable of killing tens of thousands of Americans before any hospital understood what was happening. Cherry Blossoms at Night was the main plan, but it was not the only one. In parallel, Unit 731 studied using transcontinental balloons filled with plague-infected fleas to fly over American territory carried by the jet stream. The balloons actually existed, were tested, and versions with conventional bombs did fall in forests in Oregon. The idea of the biological version was to spread the plague on farms and small towns in the interior, far from the major military centers. Another plan involved biological kamikazes. Suicide pilots would take off from submarines in planes full of infected fleas and dive into American urban targets, spreading the agent on impact. Porcelain bombs with live rats descending by parachute were also developed, with the air inside the casing sufficient to keep the animals breathing until they touched the ground. The rats would emerge immediately, infected, ready to start the transmission cycle. Unit 731 also planned attacks against the American agricultural economy. Researchers studied pathogens capable of killing livestock on a large scale and fungi to destroy wheat and corn crops in the American Midwest. The idea was not just to kill people, it was to attack the food system of the United States, create famine in the interior, overburden the war effort, and force a peace negotiation through economic exhaustion. None of this left the drawing board, but the formulas existed. Operation Cherry Blossoms at night never happened for practical reasons. The atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki fell in August of 1945, and Japan surrendered before the scheduled date. The I-400 submarines that would have been on their way to California were captured by the American Navy on the high seas, taken to Hawaii for inspection, and sunk in deep waters, so the Soviets would not have access to Japanese technology. The detailed plans were destroyed before the withdrawal. Fact number 3. Unit 731 attacked Chinese cities with bubonic plague and killed thousands. On October 27, 1940, in the port city of Ningbo, in Zhejiang province, Japanese planes descended in a low pass at about 650 feet of altitude at 7 in the morning. They did not drop bombs. They dropped fleas. Live fleas, bred in a laboratory, infected with Yersinia pestis, the bacterium responsible for the Black Death that devastated medieval Europe 6 centuries before that morning. Along with the fleas, the planes released wheat, rice, and cotton fragments. The function was to attract the city's rats to the dropped material and ensure that the fleas had live hosts to multiply on before reaching people. The residents who saw the planes pass thought it was war propaganda or food dropped by mistake. They cataloged the debris as a curiosity. 4 days later, the first person died with symptoms of bubonic plague. Within 48 hours, Chinese doctors identified the agent. It was plague, a disease that had not appeared in Ningbo for decades. The local authorities immediately understood that this was not a natural epidemic, closed the Kaiming Street neighborhood, and built a wall about 14 feet high around the contaminated area. Those inside could not leave. Those outside could not enter. The wall was erected in 3 days by volunteer civilian labor. When the epidemic was finally contained at the end of November, the municipal government made the most drastic decision. The entire Kaiming Street neighborhood was burned to the ground. Houses, shops, workshops, furniture, clothing, nothing was spared. It was the only way to eliminate the remaining fleas and the infected rats still circulating among the ruins. 106 people died officially in the attack. The real number, including unreported rural cases, is estimated in the hundreds. In November of 1941, Unit 731 repeated the operation in Changde, in Hunan province, more than 600 miles away. 40 members of the unit conducted the mission personally. Same technique, same altitude, same payload of plague-infected fleas. But this time, the attack was on a larger city, with more fragile sanitary infrastructure. The epidemic escaped municipal control. Chinese estimates indicate approximately 10,000 direct and indirect deaths in the following months. The operation against Changde was so well documented by the Japanese themselves that it became central evidence in the post-war period. In 2002, the Tokyo District Court officially recognized, for the first time in Japanese judicial history, that the Imperial Army used biological weapons against Chinese civilians between 1940 and 1942. The ruling cited Changde, Ningbo, and Kuzhou by name. It was the first time a Japanese court admitted Unit 731's biological warfare program. In April of 1942, 16 American bombers attacked Tokyo in the operation known as the Doolittle Raid. It was the first direct bombing of Japanese territory in the war, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle. The material damage was small, but the psychological impact on the Japanese command was enormous. The response came in the form of a biological campaign. Zhejiang province, which had sheltered downed American pilots, became the target of a retaliation operation. Unit 731 dumped cholera, typhus, and bubonic plague on cities, wells, and fields of Zhejiang for months. Japanese researchers later calculated that tens of thousands of Chinese civilians died in these operations. The exact number was never established, but there's a detail documented in Japanese military archives that forever changed the way the world views biological weapons. Approximately 1,700 Japanese soldiers died from the plague and cholera deployed in the field. This was the first documented case on a military scale of a biological weapon turning against those who used it. Japanese troops advanced through the contaminated terrain days after the attack, drank water from the wells, poisoned by their own unit, ate contaminated food, and fell ill en masse. The technical argument that sustained the International Biological Weapons Convention of 1972 decades later was born from this episode. Pathogens do not respect borders, uniforms, or military orders. Fact number 4. Pressure chambers were used to discover the exact point at which the human body collapses. Unit 7. 31 maintained at Pingfang a set of hypobaric chambers, sealed equipment capable of simulating high altitudes. Prisoners were placed inside, the door was locked from outside, and the internal pressure gradually dropped. The researchers observed through the reinforced glass window with stopwatches and notebooks in hand, recording the physiological response of the body. As the internal pressure dropped inside the chamber, the prisoner's body began to enter progressive physiological collapse. The researchers noted each stage: time until loss of consciousness, time until respiratory arrest, time until clinical death. The internal records of the unit describe with technical precision the brutal effects of extreme decompression on the human body. Death came within minutes, and the bodies were dissected immediately. Alongside the pressure chambers, Unit 731 operated human centrifuges, large-scale motorized equipment capable of spinning a person strapped in at extremely high speed. The objective was to study how much human physiology could withstand in G-forces, the acceleration that fighter pilots face in aerial combat and that astronauts face during launch. The researchers gradually increased the speed until the subject lost consciousness, and continued until death. The results generated by Unit 731 established that the point of death for a healthy adult lies between 10 and 15 G of continuous acceleration. This was data that no ethical laboratory in the world could produce. The Japanese researchers knew it. The archives became a military reference decades before any Western aviation program achieved anything comparable. When the United States began developing the space program in the following decades, NASA engineers needed to understand what happens to a human body under extreme acceleration, sudden pressure changes, and oxygen loss at altitude. Western aerospace medicine obtained similar data with military volunteers in the post-war period in ethical and controlled tests. But the Japanese numbers came first and continued serving as a technical comparison. Modern aerospace medicine still uses, without citing the source, parameters that were originally established by those chambers and centrifuges in Pingfang. Engineers who design fighter pilot suits, designers of pressurized cabins, military doctors who train crew members for high-altitude ejection, all work with tables that descend from the notebooks of Unit 731. Fact number 5. Unit 731 was the largest biological weapons factory the world had ever seen. At Pingfang, inside a dedicated building, 4,500 flea incubators operated continuously. Each incubator received live rats infected with bubonic plague as hosts. The fleas reproduced, sucked the contaminated blood from the rats, and were collected in regular cycles for immediate use in aerial attacks or storage in refrigerated chambers. Each production cycle delivered approximately 100 pounds of live fleas. The researchers arrived at the ideal ratio of 3,000 fleas per rat, weighing about 1 pound. More than that, and the rat died before generating productive value. Less, and the collection became inefficient. It was biological engineering calculated like any assembly line. Internal manuals described cycle time, host mortality rate, and expected productivity per incubator. Alongside flea production, the unit manufactured the pure agent. In just a few days of operation, it could produce about 60 pounds of Yersinia pestis ready for use. For comparison, that volume is sufficient, in theory, to infect entire populations of medium-sized cities if distributed efficiently. The stock was kept in refrigerated chambers, in sealed glass vials with coded labels identifying batch, date, and estimated potency. The American historian Sheldon Harris, author of the most complete research ever done on the Japanese biological program, made a comparison that shocked the academic community in the 1990s. The Unit 731 program was larger in volume and infrastructure than the combined programs of France, Hungary, Italy, Poland, and the Soviet Union between the two wars. It was not a department. It was a national military industry, sustained by the imperial budget. Industrial scale was not the only distinguishing feature of Unit 731. The other was the type of clinical data it could generate. In no laboratory in the world was it permitted to purposely infect people with bubonic plague. At Pingfang, this was routine. The researchers documented in individual files the hour-by-hour progression of the disease in hundreds of prisoners, from the initial bite to death. Each stage was timed, photographed and analyzed. The records described the appearance of the buboes, the advance of the fever, the coloration of the skin, the neurological behavior, the progression of respiratory collapse, all measured at short intervals. Each patient received an identification number, a specific pathogen, and had their clinical trajectory followed until the final outcome. The result was a database on plague in humans without precedent in the history of medicine. 3 of these documents survived the destruction at the end of the war and are today preserved at the Library of Congress of the United States. Each one is more than 100 pages, translated from Japanese to English. They are clinical reports with graphs, tables, and written descriptions of the progression of diseases in the prisoners. They were declassified decades after the war, but the content remains little studied outside restricted academic circles around the world. These 3 documents were the reason the United States secretly negotiated with Unit 731 researchers at the end of the war. The American government calculated that the scientific value of the material was too high to be destroyed along with the war criminals. The offer was simple: total immunity against any trial for crimes against humanity in exchange for the complete clinical archives. The Japanese accepted the deal without hesitation. Fact number 6. Prisoners were frozen alive so doctors could discover how to treat frostbite. The person responsible for the program was the physiologist Yoshimura Hisato. The focus of the research was practical. Japanese soldiers operated in the extreme climates of Manchuria, Siberia, and the plateaus of northern China. They lost fingers, hands, and feet to frostbite every winter. The Imperial Army needed a medical protocol capable of saving limbs. Yoshimura submerged the arms and legs of prisoners in buckets of water with ice and salt. The presence of salt lowered the freezing point of the liquid to below -4 degrees Fahrenheit, sufficient to freeze human tissue in a few minutes. The limbs remained submerged until the skin became hard as stone. To confirm that the freezing was complete, the researcher struck the limb with a wooden rod. After confirming the freezing, Yoshimura tested thawing methods. He warmed limbs in hot water at different temperatures. He brought them close to open fire. He applied direct massage to the skin. He rubbed with dry fabric. Each technique produced a different result in terms of tissue recovery. The majority of prisoners did not survive the testing process itself. After years of systematic testing, Yoshimura reached the technical conclusion that the most effective protocol for reversing severe frostbite is immediate immersion in water at a temperature slightly above 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit and never exceeding 122 degrees. Slower heating or more aggressive heating generates irreversible vascular damage and leads to amputation. The exact number, calibrated in a laboratory, became an international medical reference under the name controlled rewarming. This protocol is taught today in every military medical school in the world. Civilian first aid manuals, mountain rescue team training, expeditionary medicine courses, all repeat the same number established in Pingfang, 98.6 degrees, never above 122. The origin of the data is rarely mentioned in the textbooks. The authors cite the conclusions as established knowledge without tracing the exact provenance of the research that generated it. Yoshimura Hisato returned to Japan after the war, without suffering any legal consequence for what he did at Pingfang. He became a university professor, published scientific articles on physiology in extreme climates, and founded the Japanese Society of Biometeorology. He died decades later, respected in his field and never called to testify about the human sources of his data. Fact number 7. The official facade of Unit 731 said that Pingfang was a sawmill. The name registered in the documents of the Kwantung Army was the Department of Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification. For the people of the region, the story was even simpler. It was a lumber processing industry that supplied the Japanese Army. The presence of so many trucks and laboratory buildings was explained as a need for log treatment. The complex occupied approximately 2 1/3 square miles on the outskirts of the Chinese city of Harbin, in the puppet state of Manchukuo, controlled by Japan. It had more than 150 buildings, laboratories, surgical rooms, internal prisons, crematory furnaces, military barracks, bomb factories, animal breeding facilities. It was the largest military biological research center ever built. Prisoners arrived in black windowless trucks, nicknamed by the unit's own staff as crows. They came captured by the Kempeitai, the Japanese military police, the direct equivalent of the German Gestapo. They were Chinese civilians kidnapped from the streets, political dissidents, espionage suspects, common criminals, Russian and Korean prisoners of war. Whoever disappeared in Manchuria under Japanese occupation was rarely found alive again. The trucks entered through a side gate controlled by sentries with orders to shoot any civilian who approached. They descended directly onto an underground ramp that led to a tunnel hidden beneath the facade of the central building. This tunnel took the victims directly to the cells of the internal prison without anyone outside being able to see the movement. Not nearby residents, not administrative staff of the unit, not troops rotating through the base. Upon arriving at the cells, each prisoner lost their name. They received a 3-digit number painted on an identification plate. That number accompanied them until death. The doctors referred to the subjects by number, recorded the experiments by number, sent the bodies to cremation by number. The unit's archives contained thousands of these numbered files, without any biographical information. The prisoners were called internally maruta, a Japanese word meaning logs of wood. The term was born as an inside joke among the researchers. Since the official facade said they cut wood there, they joked that they were in fact processing logs. Division chiefs requested the delivery of a certain number of maruta for an experiment. Doctors noted how many logs had been used that day. The dehumanization extended to the scientific publications. Unit 731. Researchers published articles in Japanese medical journals during and after the war, describing sophisticated experiments in physiology and infectiology. In the publications, they attributed the data to tests conducted on monkeys. It was the way to circulate knowledge without confessing the real origin. Some of these studies continue to be cited in international scientific literature. Fact number 8. Prisoners were tied to stakes in an open field to test flamethrowers and grenades. Unit 7. 31 had an open-air testing area outside the main Pingfang complex. It was a cleared terrain, marked at progressive distances, with wooden stakes fixed in the ground. Each stake received a prisoner tied, standing up. The distances varied from about 16 to 160 feet from the detonation point or the operating point of the military equipment being tested. Flamethrowers were fired in sequence against the subjects. The researchers timed the burn duration until loss of consciousness, measured the effective range of the flame, and noted the temperature recorded by sensors installed near the stakes. Grenades and fragmentation bombs were detonated at different distances to map the lethal radius and the incapacitating injury radius. The objective of these tests was not pure research. It was validation of military equipment. The numbers collected at Pingfang went back to Japanese weapons manufacturers as operational effectiveness data, weapons instruction manuals, infantry training pamphlets, technical specifications for ordering new series of grenades. Everything was adjusted based on the results obtained from the prisoners tied to the stakes. The military industry ran for years like this. The same test field received ceramic bombs loaded with fleas infected with bubonic plague. It was the experimental version of the weapons that would later be used against Ningbo, Changde, and the plans for attacking the United States. The researchers needed to confirm whether the ceramic shell withstood the impact without killing the live insects inside, whether the fleas dispersed correctly on the terrain, and whether they reached the human hosts tied to test posts. Prisoners who survived the initial explosion and became infected by the fleas were taken back to the main complex and kept in separate cells under clinical observation until they died of plague. Each stage of the disease was documented, each physiological response was cataloged, and the final body entered the dissection room. It was the complete validation cycle of a biological weapon, from the bomb design to the clinical confirmation of the final death. Fact number 9. At the end of the war, they executed the last 400 prisoners and released the infected rats. On August 9, 1945, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan, and the Red Army began advancing through Manchuria with unexpected speed. The command of Unit 731 understood within hours that Pingfang would be captured within days. The order was immediate: destroy everything. The internal prison held approximately 400 prisoners alive at the time of the order. It was impossible to transport that many people to any other location in time. It was impossible to free them without ensuring that the entire operation of the unit would be revealed to the world. The commanders adopted the fastest and most brutal solution available. On August 11th and 12th, 1945, in just 2 days, all remaining prisoners of Unit 731 were eliminated. The first attempt was to distribute ropes so that the prisoners would hang themselves in their own cells. About a quarter of them obeyed. The others refused. For those, the unit's doctors administered potassium cyanide in cups of water, offered as if it were medicine. Those who noticed and refused to drink received a direct lethal injection administered by military nurses. Within 48 hours, no prisoner remained alive inside the Pingfang complex. The cremation took place in the unit's own furnaces, burned at maximum capacity during the following days. The bones that remained, which were not fully reduced to ash, were collected manually and taken to a demolition field within the complex. There, they were placed in piles and destroyed with military explosives. When the Soviets arrived, they found only rubble, charred fragments, and terrain without any identifiable trace. Alongside the elimination of the prisoners, the unit's personnel faced another technical problem: what to do with the infected animals that served as live hosts for the biological production. There were thousands of rats, housed in separate breeding facilities, all infested with fleas carrying bubonic plague. Taking them along was impossible. Killing them one by one would require weeks. The solution was to open the doors of the breeding facilities and release the animals into the surroundings of Harbin. The rats emerged en masse and spread across the Manchurian countryside. The fleas came with them. The plague established itself in wild rodent populations of the region, and from there passed to humans. Between 1946 and 1948, outbreaks of bubonic plague struck villages and small cities around Harbin. Chinese medical estimates indicate at least 30,000 deaths in this epidemic. The last generation of Unit 731 victims died without ever knowing the origin of the disease. The surviving staff of Unit 731 received clear orders before boarding the withdrawal trains. Each one was to return to Japan in absolute silence, never mention Pingfang, never confirm the existence of the unit, never admit participation in the experiments. Anyone who could not keep the secret received a cyanide capsule to use in case they were interrogated by the Soviets. The majority made the journey back without recorded incidents. Fact number 10. Prisoners received injections of horse blood. In one of the wings of the Pingfang complex, dedicated to the study of transfusion and bodily fluids, prisoners received direct injections of animal blood into the bloodstream. Horse, cow, goat. It depended on availability. The objective was to observe the human immune reaction to the blood of other species, the speed of rejection, and the time until the collapse of the organs of the human body. Prisoners also received transfusions of human blood with incompatible blood types. Type A blood in a type B person. Rh positive blood in an Rh negative patient, in volumes calculated to guarantee maximum immune response. The doctors timed the interval until fever, until kidney failure, until cardiac arrest. The bodies were dissected afterward to record the internal damage. Another group of prisoners received only seawater to drink for days. The researchers wanted to establish with precision how long the human body resisted saline poisoning before liver failure, cellular dehydration, and death by electrolyte collapse. The data generated in this experiment later served the development of military maritime survival protocols, aimed at crews of torpedoed ships during the war. In a third wing, prisoners were exposed to progressive doses of X-rays until reaching lethal levels. The objective was to document acute radiation syndrome in the human body, day by day, hour by hour, neurological, cutaneous, hematological, gastrointestinal symptoms. These records were the first complete clinical studies of acute radiation syndrome. When American doctors treated survivors of the atomic bombs, they described symptoms already cataloged. These three sets of experiments generated data that became central to modern medicine in the post-war world. Transfusion medicine established rigorous protocols for blood typing and donor cross-matching, in part because the Japanese had documented, on a human scale, exactly what happened when these protocols were violated on purpose in a controlled laboratory by doctors. Nuclear medicine that developed in the following decades, with applications ranging from oncological radiotherapy to the management of accidents at atomic power plants, inherited without citing the source the basic parameters of human response to ionizing radiation established by Unit 731 researchers. Every time an emergency medicine manual describes the expected clinical progression of acute radiation syndrome, it repeats data from Pingfang. Fact number 11. The doctors contaminated prisoners by disguising vaccines. When a new batch of prisoners arrived at Unit 731, they frequently underwent an intake medical examination conducted by uniformed nurses. During the examination, they received an injection presented as a vaccine against common diseases of the region. The injection contained the pathogenic agent of that week's study: cholera, plague, anthrax, typhus, depending on the research underway. The technical advantage of this method was enormous. The doctor knew exactly the moment of inoculation, the dose applied, the exact vector. They could time the progression of the disease with precision impossible in any other clinical context. The files noted the second of the injection and the second of the first observable symptom. It was research on human infectiology done under clean laboratory conditions, with a subject who believed he was being protected from something. Alongside these disguised infections, the unit tested real vaccines on humans, experimental vaccines still in the development phase. The process was inverted compared to standard medical protocol. Instead of testing first on rats, then on primates, Unit 731 went directly to human testing without intermediate steps. Those who died, died. Those who lived entered the reports. The practical result was the production of some functional military vaccines distributed to Japanese troops in the field. Vaccines against cholera and typhoid fever mainly, which protected soldiers in tropical zones. These products came from the work of Unit 731 researchers, without anyone in the Army's logistics chain knowing exactly how they had been tested. The doses arrived packaged and coded for direct use in the field. Fact number 12. Those responsible for Unit 731 were never punished. When Japan surrendered in August of 1945, American officers arrived in Japanese territory with a dual mission: rebuild the country and identify war criminals for trial in Tokyo. Shiro Ishii, commander of Unit 731, was at the top of several initial lists. There was American documentation and testimonies from Chinese prisoners who had survived biological attacks. Instead of arresting Ishii, the Americans opened a secret negotiation. The offer was simple and direct: total immunity against any trial for crimes against humanity in exchange for the complete archives of Unit 731. All the clinical files, all the experiment reports, all the biological weapons data. The negotiation was conducted by officers linked to General Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Commander of the American occupation, and formalized in 1948. Ishii never spent a single day in prison. He was a guest at Fort Detrick in the American state of Maryland, headquarters of the United States Biological Weapons Program, where he lectured to American military intelligence officers about the clinical results of Unit 731. He returned to Japan, opened a private medical clinic in Tokyo, and treated patients for the rest of his life without problems. He died in 1959 of throat cancer at 77 years old. No court ever summoned him. The other members of the unit had similar trajectories. Masaji Kitano, Ishii's deputy commander, founded the Green Cross, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in modern Japan. Ryoichi Naito took over the direction of the National Blood Bank system. Yoshimura Hisato became a university professor and an authority on physiology. The Soviet Union did manage to try 12 members of the unit in Khabarovsk in 1949 and applied sentences of 2 to 25 years in prison. But the United States classified the Soviet trial as communist propaganda throughout the entire Cold War and completely ignored the content of the testimonies collected in Khabarovsk. The documents negotiated in 1948 remained in restricted archives for consecutive decades, and part of them remains to this day without total declassification by the American government. Unit 731 was the largest organized operation of crimes against humanity in Asia in the 20th century. Not a single person responsible spent a day in prison,